It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. My lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold.
Good morning, everybody. Hi. Welcome. Today is October 12th, and I want to welcome you to episode 51 of Coffee and Cloud Native. My name is Adrian Goins. I don't know what I'm doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. I clicked the wrong button. My name is Adrian Goins. I have a teleprompter. My teleprompter was not scrolling. I have no idea what I'm supposed to say. This week we're up on Twitch, and I was like monitoring everything and making sure everything looks good, and so totally here we are. If you're new to the show, well, hi. Every night, I and my army of bots scour the internet for news and content related to Kubernetes and Cloud Native, and every day you'll find me here. Last week I was over there, but now I'm here to share the bits that I find interesting. It's a curated list of content. I go through around 200 submissions every night, and I select just a handful of them for the next day's show. These are the tools and the things that I would use, or that I do use, or that I want to share with you, because none of us have time to use everything. If you're following live on Twitch, please click the follow button for the channel. And if you're watching this in the future, click the thumbs up button on the video so that the YouTube algorithm shares it with other people. You can join the community site too. Links for that are in the video description. Live chat happens on Twitch in the live chat channel. I got to change that because I keep reading it wrong. Live chat happens on Twitch or in the live chat channel on Discord. And then there's a bot that streams those back and forth. So whichever one you're in, you'll be able to see stuff. So don't worry about it. There's so many ways to join the live chat. If you want to, just come hang out because it's easy. And in fact, who do we have in the chat today? I was talking with some of you. I see Nuno's here, Trix is here, Mo's, good morning, Duck, Ian, Kyrasi? I don't know where the emphasis, Kyrasi, Kai, there you go. Wifebot, good morning, Wifebot. Thank you all for coming and joining us today. And let's see if I can get some numbers off of, I know somebody's still gonna go to YouTube and they're gonna be confused about why. Hey, all right. About why there's no stream on YouTube. So it looks like we're good over there. Looks like we're good on bandwidth. Looks like we're good to just get started. I hope you all had a nice weekend. Yeah, I hope you all had a nice weekend. I spent part of Saturday crawling around underneath my house where there's between 20 and 30 inches of clearance, installing a new drain pipe for my washer because the old one was installed incorrectly. And I pulled something in my back. So if I suddenly wince and scream or look like somebody just stabbed me in the back, it's because I can barely move. I can't really move my neck. That was my weekend. But you know what? The washer drains now, and that's okay. I'm willing to suffer for a few days for that. Let's get started. I was talking with Dan Pop from the Popcast. Well, Dan Pop, he also does the Popcast, in addition to other things. And we were talking about network policy and how network policy is, he believes that it's one of the harder things one of the things that people have the most difficulty with in the CKA exam. Not because network policy itself is hard, but just because because the syntax is complicated, the structure is complicated, the policies can overlap, you may get unexpected results. But I believe strongly that things are only as hard as we tell ourselves that they are. So if you want to think that network policy is hard, or Kubernetes is hard, or crawling around under your house is hard, or any of those things, then you'll find that they actually are. But if you just accept that things are what they are, it's just a process, it's neither good nor bad, then it'll be easier for you to move through things. And if you can actually convince yourself that things are genuinely easy, new stuff, perhaps challenging, but not impossible, not anything negative, then you'll find that your brain is more receptive to learning about them. So here's an article on network policy that basically shows you that network policy is easy. You got some stuff, you can configure some things, you can do some stuff with it. It's got some pretty pictures, and it will explain to you how network policy works. But if you've ever done anything with a firewall, ingress and egress, then you already understand the general concepts. And once you understand the concept, everything else is just syntax. One thing about network policy is, well, you don't know what addresses pods are going to have. Enter eBPF and Cilium. Cilium, I love Cilium. I love eBPF. I love that this just suddenly makes, well, not to overuse the word easy, it takes the complexity of a thing and makes it less complicated. So now with Cilium, which you can even install as a plugin on top of the CNI that you're already using, you can just rock and roll with network policy support. Obviously, if you're using Calico, you get network policy as well. Or if you're using Canal, you get the network policy plugin from Calico too. So whichever way you're going, you probably need to roll this out. When you're building stuff with a firewall, there's a default deny, which is, well, you could also do default allow, but usually you have a default deny. So anything not allowed is denied. And I think that's really the way that we need to go with Kubernetes. Anything that is not permitted, so just by default, an ingress and egress policy that says nobody's allowed to talk to anything. And then when you deploy something, you decide and you configure what it's allowed to do. You can do that with your routes, you can do that with authentication, and then you do that with network policy to make sure that stuff is just as locked down as you can get it to be. Because cybercrime. I used to laugh at the idea of, cyber criminals being like all of the whatever, but you've got different classifications now of cyber criminal. You've got your script kiddies still, so, you deploy Kali and go port scan a bunch of stuff. And in fact, a few episodes ago, I talked about Aqua, who runs honeypots so that they can just get a state, like an awareness of the state of the threat marketplace by seeing what people are coming and doing, and then once they compromise a system, what they're installing. The bulk of the stuff out there is still looking for unencrypted or unprotected Docker API ports, and it's installing cryptocurrency miners, which is honestly not very sophisticated. But what you need to remember is that just because that's the bulk of what you see, that's not the stuff that's not everything. And I was surprised to find, well, once I read it, I wasn't that surprised, but it didn't occur to me that all of the tools that we have available to us are available to criminals as well. And we understand that from the perspective of, Linux and tools and Kubernetes and stuff like that. But they're actually using supply chain attacks to poison machine learning models so that they're less accurate. And there was a metric in here that said that 3% data set poisoning leads to an 11% reduction in accuracy. So if they can compromise a system in an environment that is responsible for training ML models, they're able to get those models to not detect or to classify as good information that they're sending that might otherwise be classified as bad. Dan Pop had Liz Rice on the podcast, which is an excellent show. I recommend that you go and listen to it. And she talked about the bulk of the stuff that they're seeing are actually supply chain attacks. This article talks about two other types of attacks: generative adversarial network attacks, or using GANs to create attacks that bypass malware detection systems, or what was the other one? So a GAN has two AI systems that basically fight with each other. So one of them generates fake information and the other one tries to detect it. If it generates something fake and it gets detected, then it learns from that. And if it generates something fake and it doesn't get detected, then this one learns from that. So back and forth, they're able to very quickly train themselves up to be extremely effective. So for example, they say that NVIDIA trained a unique AI model to recreate Pac-Man by just observing hours of gameplay with no game engine. Like, that's proper machine learning. Well, bad guys are using this to do, the other one, obfuscation. So malware, well, I guess it's kind of the same thing. So, all right, whatever, we're moving on. Bot manipulation. There was an attack recently where they were able to figure out how bots were making decisions in a cryptocurrency trading system, and then they were able to just feed stimuli into the system, so the bots made the wrong decision, and they were then able to sell a bunch of crypto and cash out. Cybercrime is real. Now, running network policy in your environments isn't going to protect you from, oh, hey, my chat's not scrolling. Let me scroll that down. It's not going to protect you from this kind of stuff, but it just highlights that we need to move security to the forefront of the systems that we build. And it's easy to make it an afterthought. It's easy to be like, oh, I'll come back and do that later. But you know you won't. And you just look historically, it's just really easy to have that fall off the list. Build this in, make it so that if everything in your environment is default deny, well, then when you deploy something, you have to go and make it work the way that you want it to. So force yourself into scenarios where you can build the habit to build security in. Mo says that network policy is very hard at the beginning, but when you master it, it'll be very easy. He didn't answer the network policy question in the CKA, but when he took the CKAD exam, he found network policy question to be a piece of cake. So it's just a matter of time and some practice. Anything that you learn how to do from the beginning is a challenge. Think about learning how to drive or learning how to, anything that you know how to do that in the beginning you didn't. That's all it is. So just work through it. My 5th grade teacher, Mr. Sarine, taught me one thing that sticks with me to this day. I'm sure he taught me other things like math. But he taught me about when you don't understand something, just read the directions again. And when he said it, I thought that was the dumbest thing ever. But it actually works. If you read the instructions and you don't understand it, just read them again. You still may not understand them. Read them again. Continue to read them and your brain will start to make associations and it will understand pieces of it. And after a few times of going through it, you'll be like, oh, well, of course, that just totally makes sense. Trick says installing Kubernetes the first time was a bear and now he has a script. Okay. There you go. Not exactly the same thing, kind of cheating, but you could, from a security standpoint, you can make sure that the stuff that you deploy, if you have a script to do it, if you're using Terraform or Ansible or whatever, just build those systems in. I'm flogging a dead horse. Let's move on. I'm not talking about that today. I felt a little bad over the weekend because on Friday I ran out of time. And so I was just running through stuff and I was like, oh, yay, Rook graduated. And we just moved on. It deserves a little bit more of a mention. For the CNCF to graduate a project is a big deal. Rook's been in the CNCF since 2018, and Rook is a fabulous piece of software. I don't use it because, when I did use it, it was wonderful, but I didn't. Because I pay for all my own infrastructure, I didn't allocate enough resources to it, and it was Rook Ceph. And if you don't allocate enough resources to Ceph, Ceph collapses and terrible things happen. So that happened to me, and now I don't use Rook Ceph. But I found it to be rock solid and very friendly and just a beautiful way to get storage solutions into Kubernetes. So with Rook, you can also do Gluster. They have an object storage. And congratulations to them for moving to graduated status. I struggled with figuring out how you say that because technically the CNCF graduated Rook, but I was trying to say Rook graduated from. It's not like they're in high school. They didn't graduate from the CNCF. They're still in the CNCF. They graduated from a status. I don't know, whatever. They are now up there with Kubernetes and Prometheus, and I'm not sure who else has graduated, but congratulations, Rook. Flavor Flav. You can't see, but that's the Hoff, and this is Carol Baskin. This is called Celebrities Explain DevOps, and wow, it really needs to be called Celebrities Can Read, because it's the worst delivery of any information on Kubernetes or DevOps that I've ever seen. But I didn't even realize that there was a site where you can go and you can just get people to read your stuff. So Hoff costs $300, Flavor Flav costs $250, and Carol Baskin is $300 as well. But everybody's on there, so that's good. In the time of COVID, celebrities can still be celebrities. What I found to be interesting about this is it brought attention to CTO.ai. I'd never heard of CTO.ai. Based solely upon their name, what do you think they do? AI? For CTOs? Maybe? Wrong. They do something else. I don't even know what they do. They do Slack first DevOps workflows, which has nothing to do with their name. I'm including this because it's kind of funny. And so there'll be a link for it. You can go and watch it. But it does highlight the value of tricky marketing, because now all of Twitter knows who CTO.ai is, and it costs them $850 on a cost per lead. I have no idea how much traffic they actually got, but for $850, I'm sure they got more than 850 people to go and look at their site. They got me to talk about it. That was a good trick. But then it led me into, well, what could we do that's better? Oh, I love that image of the containers falling over. It's so sad when container ships, not capsize, but what is it, list, and containers collapse. Here's Kubernetes explained in 100 seconds. It starts out very good, and then it kind of, I don't know. I think he could have done Kubernetes in 60 seconds, because in the last 40 seconds, he starts to get into like replica set, but then he doesn't get into any other resources. But I thought that this was also kind of cute. And then that led into this doc, which has the noble aspiration. Hey, Tej! Tej gets a point. No, Tej, we are on Twitch today. From now on, we're only on Twitch. It'll be posted to YouTube afterward as a regular video, because YouTube is doing a terrible... There's two reasons. Hang on. We're gonna stop here. Breaks. Why am I only streaming on Twitch now? There's a couple of reasons. One, YouTube does a terrible job of sharing the video afterwards, so we're not getting the exposure that I want. Two, YouTube recently started doing this thing that's just awful. Some of you have no doubt experienced it, and you can thumbs up in the chat if you've experienced this. After the stream ends, it's good for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then it goes into some processing queue. And it's always been the case where YouTube processes the video for 12 to 14 hours before I can actually go in and like add an end screen to it or do anything at all to it. But starting 2-3 weeks ago, during that processing time, it just buffers. It'll like play for 2 seconds, buffer for 30 seconds, play for 2 seconds, buffer for 30 seconds. And what's happening is people who don't watch the stream live come back at some point in the, oh my gosh, they come back at some point in the subsequent 12 hours and they just have a terrible viewing experience, and they think that I screwed it up or something. And I don't want anybody to have a negative experience when they're trying to watch this show. So no live streaming on YouTube anymore. Live stream to Twitch, because Twitch knows how to do it. And then I'm going to take the video afterwards, because I'm recording it locally, do a quick edit on it, post it to YouTube. So within a couple hours, it'll actually be up there and anybody can watch it afterwards. That's why. Now back to the show. Noble aspiration of making a doc about Kubernetes for everyone. This is still a work in progress, and it's got some stuff in here. For example, how does Kubernetes work? Well, that's not a link. There we go. How does Kubernetes work? So, some explanation, some stuff you could probably get better off of Kubernetes documentation, but this is being crowdsourced. If you want to add information to it, the goal being that, we build a big crowdsourced document that makes Kubernetes accessible for everybody. You can request edit access. So I'll have this linked as well in the article that goes up on the community site afterwards. But the coolest part of this, if I scroll back up to the top, are all of these Kubernetes case studies. I had a thing on a few weeks ago about a guy that used, he created an operator for ordering food from Domino's via their API. I didn't realize that Domino's actually uses Kubernetes. Domino's is a pizza chain in the United States. So I didn't realize that they actually use Kubernetes. But then they're actual real case studies about various companies. Bose, how do they use Kubernetes? I still see people saying, is Kubernetes a thing? Is containers a thing? Here's how to use Swarm. Come on, Kubernetes is legit. And real companies are using it, not because of its hype value, though that does also happen, but because it genuinely accelerates the things that companies care about. It creates an environment in which you can deploy software faster, in which you can roll forward and roll back, in which you can do things with lower stress. all of the tools that exist in the ecosystem around Kubernetes are designed to move things faster with a greater level of success. And those are the things that companies want. So why wouldn't they use Kubernetes? Now, that's not to say that they can't still screw it up and do it wrong and take VMs and run them as pods or whatever, though that also has a place. But check out the case studies, and the next time somebody says, nobody really uses this, or it's all like you crazy, newfangled millennials out in Silicon Valley. Not actually true. Uh-oh, hang on. Nuno's saying something about Swarm. Okay, Nuno apparently has a game that he plays with himself to try and get me to stop talking at some point during the stream. Well, he gets 2 points for today. Uh-oh. You shall not diss? Look, he's making fun of me for saying bad stuff about Swarm. Swarm has a place. Swarm had a place. For a long time, we thought that Swarm was going to be like the winner of the container wars, but that didn't happen. I understand that people are just getting started with container orchestration and they have a limited amount of resources available and they just need something. So Swarm, I think, is still an okay place to start. I don't think anybody should be running Swarm in production. If you have resources, use Kubernetes. Period. The end. So it's not to say that Swarm is bad. I just don't think that it has a place in a production environment. And I think that once it gets relegated to the land of like baby steps in container orchestration, they're going to stop funding it and it's going to die. And then what are you going to do? Tools like K3S make that. I don't know what I was going to say there. Tools like K3S make it possible for you to use Kubernetes in environments where you have fewer resources. This is a project from a couple of guys at SUSE, totally random and unrelated. I found this just because it was up on Twitter. They've created an installer that gives you K3S, Kubeflow, or TensorFlow, Kubeflow and TensorFlow, and Argo. So if you are wanting to deploy any type of ML stuff in an IoT or edge environment, or even on some place that actually has horsepower, you can deploy K3 AI and you don't have to worry about wiring all of those things together. They'll give you a whole system based on K3S to get stuff up and running. Nuno says, yes, totally agreeing for production nowadays, but still today, try to get a Windows node inside of Kubernetes. Okay, well, other than the fact that it's really expensive, that's not hard. You can run Windows containers. You can run... Mo says he wasted 6 months of his life learning Docker Swarm. So I'm not a Windows guy, but I have deployed Windows Server 2019 worker nodes in a Kubernetes cluster with Rancher, and it wasn't hard at all. You just did it. If you're going to run Windows containers inside of Kubernetes, then you need to have Windows worker nodes, but you still need to have the Linux control plane, and you need to have one Linux server for your ingress controller. One of the nice things about Rancher's solution for Windows worker nodes is that it prioritizes Windows instead of most systems prioritizing Linux. If you have a hybrid environment, you have to label your nodes, and then you have to indicate where your pods should go. And there's a default. In most systems, the default is this thing is really annoying. It's like blinking and stuff. In most systems, there's a default that goes to the Linux nodes. So you have to annotate your Windows workloads to go to the Windows nodes. In Rancher stuff, it's the other way around. We figured that people who are going to deploy Windows worker nodes are probably running all Windows environments, and that's probably where they want their stuff to go. So I didn't find it to be that hard. Ian says, Babusa, take a look at... Oh, see, I don't know if it's... The names in Discord, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Babusa Sidhar, Babusa. Okay, so I think it's Babu. Take a look at Ketchup. Ketchup is a great tool for installing K3S really, really fast. I use it in all of my K3S installations. Oh my gosh, we're running out of time. That's so exciting. It means I'm doing something right. Last week, I made an offhand comment that I deployed Gloo here in my rebuilt cluster in the house, but that I was having a little bit of a struggle with it because I didn't really know how to get started. Solo reached out to me immediately after the show and said, hey, how can we help? So first of all, thank you very much for that. That was really amazing. They put me in touch with one of their field engineers, and I said, it's not that I'm necessarily having trouble with Gloo. I think the documentation for Gloo is great. I just don't really know where to start because I'm coming from the ingress world, and then it's like it's an API gateway, it's super powerful. And they pointed me at some resources. In that conversation, they explained something that makes sense. A lot of the terminology in Gloo actually comes from the Istio world. So if you arrive at the API gateway world from the service mesh world, then a lot of this stuff makes sense. And since I came from the other direction, well, it didn't. One of the things that I found after that conversation was this little tutorial on prioritizing traffic with rate limits by HTTP method. And while this in itself, first of all, it's not new, it's from July, but it's still relevant. While this in itself only gives a small example of what you can do with Gloo, it's actually part of a larger webinar that they carved up into pieces. So that's linked down here at the bottom. And if you are exploring API gateways and if you're exploring Gloo, this webinar will give you a good overview with examples of how to get started using it. This talks about setting up rate limits. And the example that they use is, per requester, you could have, for example, 10 post requests per minute, but only 2 get requests per minute. And you can set this up. Think back to a few minutes ago where I said that network policy, default deny, restrict access to stuff is good. Using API gateways and rate limits for the stuff that you do have exposed is also good because you don't know, that somebody's not running a spider across your entire site, or that they're not hammering on your API trying to brute force something, or that they're not scraping all of the content and just basically abusing the services that you're making available. So setting a resource limit on the requests that people are allowed to make is good for you. Using a tool like Gloo, that becomes easy. This talks about setting it on per resource definitions. So a configuration for each of the routes or the virtual servers. And in Gloo 1.5 that they released October 1st, so I'm a little bit behind on that one, they actually made this a policy for the enterprise version. So if you're using Gloo Enterprise and you want to do rate limit stuff, you don't have to put it on individual resources. You can configure a general policy and then apply that policy. Mo says all of the magic is coming from Envoy. That's correct. Gloo is a control plane for configuring Envoy, and Envoy does all of the heavy lifting for this and lots of other tools that are out there. Envoy is a very, very cool piece of software. We have 2 more things. You hear me talk about vendor lock-in, and you hear me talk. Dan Pop and I were talking about this last week as well. I talk smack about VMware. I talk less smack about Red Hat, but I still talk smack about Red Hat. And you might think it's because I work at Rancher, but it's not. I believe that open source software and the tools that are available to us are the keys to all of us living better lives. That it democratizes. I'm not prepared to make some cool philosophical sounding thing, but basically, if you get access to free stuff, you can do more. And by doing more, you can learn more, you can be more, you can become more. And the key in this suddenly moves to you. It's not about your money. It's not about your education. It's about your determination. When I see companies try to hoard that and make themselves into the gatekeeper, what I actually see is that they are robbing the world of they're taking people's opportunity to succeed away from them. It's not actually that way. That's just sometimes that's how I see it, and that's why I get so mad, because I think I'm like Tron, I fight for the users or something. We talk about lock-in, and the truth of the matter is Kubernetes is always going to be free, and if you're an individual, you can go and get it, and you can get lots of free open source stuff to do whatever. These guys, Red Hat and VMware, they target corporations. Corporations have money. Corporations are more than happy to be locked into things. But when we have the lock-in conversation, it often comes back to, Red Hat says that everything they do is open source. Well, I don't really know. That's like OpenShift you have to pay for. OpenShift stuff oftentimes ends up in Kubernetes. We actually owe Red Hat thanks for Ingress because that came out of routes. But I was surprised last night when I found this article where they have this kube audit for Red Hat OpenShift. But what this does is it scans your Kubernetes manifests from upstream Kubernetes and tells you if they will work inside of OpenShift, because there are things inside of OpenShift that don't exist in upstream Kubernetes anymore. That's called lock-in. Like, they're actually taking stuff out of upstream Kubernetes and replacing it with their own things. So if you're using something like pod security policy and you move over to OpenShift, well, too bad. You got to move it to whatever the Red Hat thing is. And if you're using OpenShift and you're using whatever Red Hat's crazy proprietary whatever is, and you want to go out, well, you can't. Or you can, but it's going to hurt a lot. I don't think that's good for Red Hat and IBM because they're out to make money. That's good for VMware because they're out to make money. I don't think that's good for the community. And so you are going to continue to hear me, despite the fact that I try to be positive and I want to be like, yay, kumbaya and whatever. You're going to hear me continue to call companies out on doing things that I think are bad for the community, like that. But hey, if you want to go fork over a ton of money to them and put yourself in handcuffs, there we go. Got to be on the screen. More power to you. Tool of the day. Everybody knows what JQ is. It's this, you pipe stuff to it and it parses JSON into manageable stuff. YQ is a tool that does the same thing for YAML. This article, so YQ itself is actually over here and is, they're on version 3.4.0. It's been out for a while and it's got a lot of activity going on. How many stars does it have? 2,600 stars. So this is a legit thing. This article over here talks about using YQ for templating of Kubernetes manifests, which I thought was pretty innovative. I talk about Kustomize, and honestly, Kustomize does a lot of things really well, but when you get into like the heavy, deep templating stuff, it kind of falls apart and it becomes unreasonably complicated. You could do stuff with Helm. Okay, great. That does great for templating with the values.yaml, but maybe you just want to deploy something and from a CI/CD system, you don't want to go and make a Helm chart for it because, good Lord, why? For lighter weight stuff, you can use YQ. And this article talks about, other than note the typo there's a backtick, watch out. Talks about extracting stuff from manifests and then also replacing stuff from the location and then replacing it with variables, and it can merge YAML files together, which is kind of cool, and some other stuff. So this is today's tool of the day. It is called YQ, and you can use it for templating. Last check of the chat here. Ian says big corporates, they want a single throat to choke, so be prepared to pay for that vendor compatibility analysis. Corporations have different objectives, and corporations oftentimes don't care about being locked into solutions. They care about corporation-y things. When I say that I think that it's bad for the community, it's because all of us are looking for shortcuts. So when we see, oh, what a company is doing, well, that must be the right thing to do, so I can go and do that as well. There's also the strategy of, get them while they're young. Like if VMware can get you hooked on Tanzu Kubernetes, then maybe when you end up in a corporation, you'll remember that. And there's a lot of stuff at play there, but ultimately it all comes down to VMware wants your money, Red Hat wants your money. And that's why I will always, always promote free and open source solutions and companies that have generous free tiers and stuff, because ultimately I care about the community and helping the community be successful. Ideally with spending no money or as little money as possible. Not because we're cheap, but because, come on. Why would I do the opposite? How to be successful by spending as much money as you can. Everybody knows how to do that. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I got to click down to my outro here because I hardly ever read my show notes anymore. Here we go. If you liked what you saw today, Follow me on Twitch, give the video a thumbs up on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. If you follow on Twitch, you get notifications when I start streaming. And the workflow today was just a lot more calm and casual. I can start the stream a few minutes early with the countdown and the nice little music so everybody can get settled and stuff like that. Links to everything that I talk about on the show go up in the free community site at community.cncn.io after the show ends. Come join. It's a great place. If you have something that you would like me to consider for the show, please hit me up and let me know. You can mention me in a post on the community site. You can ping me on Discord or on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching. Keep learning, everyone. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next show. Bye.